Yes, good morning and welcome back to the Celtic Unrestricted View. It's myself, JP, and joining me this morning, I know that's uncharted waters because we're normally on at night time, folks, but joining me this morning is my very good man, Mr. Ryan. How are we, son? I hope you're well. You're smiling, so that's obviously a good sign. I'll get to the fact that you've still no fell back in with the razor in a wee minute or two, mate. But also joining us this morning is a very special guest, and thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's a Mr. Anthony Joseph, all the way from the Sky Sports studio. Anthony, good morning. Thank you very much for taking the time to come on with us. We do appreciate it. I hope you're well, mate, and it's good to get you on.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. A real pleasure.
You're very welcome, mate. Ryan, so honoured to have Anthony with us today, mate. Talk us through the smile this morning, mate. What's been happening?
Talking to Anthony, mate, I'm absolutely buzzing. Can't wait. Also, as well, mate, I have lost the Mac 3 razor, mate. I've no shaved, so I'm sorry, Anthony. I don't look presentable, mate, but I'm trying.
I can't talk, by the way.
I was trying to decide as well whether I trim my beard or not, and I thought, nah.
According to females these days, the beard's the way to go, mate. So I'm trying to keep it as long as I can. So I'm not real good at keeping updated though. So no, but like you say, Jake, it's good to get Anthony on. It's a really good guest. I know it'll be a good insight for fans as well. Some fans don't really know how transfers work exactly and other things, stuff about how it goes behind the scenes. And I think that's a good learning curve as well for fans. Because like you say before we come on, that us as fans, sometimes we get frustrated, and sometimes it is good to know behind the scenes. And again, we know how busy Anthony is. He's a very good journalist, mate. He's an award-winning journalist, actually. So he's very, very busy in the Sky Studio and stuff like that, mate. So to get an hour or so his time, mate, it's fantastic. And again, Anthony, thanks for joining us this morning.
No, thank you. That's a nice introduction. So very flattering. No, thanks very much.
He's been up all night preparing that, by the way. That's the real reason behind he's no shaved, Anthony. He's been up all night trying to prepare that intro.
I was actually trying to find the Mac 3 while I was doing that intro, but I couldn't find the Mac 3, so it gave me more time to make sure I was talking properly.
Well, that's it. Well, Ryan, hold on, and we'll bring Anthony in, and he can give us a wee backstory as to his day-to-day running and what he does in terms of Sky Sports. So, Anthony, obviously we know you are a Celtic supporter. Has that always been the case, mate, since you were young? Have you always been a Celtic supporter, or is that something you've just obviously followed through, like doing your job?
No, I've always been a Celtic fan since I was a wee boy. I mean, I grew up in Aberdeen, and my family, my parents weren't really football fans. They came from an Indian background. They weren't really into football at all. And me and my brother's 3 years older than myself, and it was more just environment that got me into Celtic, really. Where my parents were devout Christians and wanted us to have a Catholic upbringing at school, so we went to Catholic primary school, and there you were either Aberdeen or Celtic. And because we didn't have a football background through family, my brother just went with his mates who were Aberdeen fans, and my mates at school from like 4 or 5 years old were Celtic fans. So and then through that you sort of grow into it, you get more involved and start going to games. And I was a season ticket holder for many, many years, going down on the Grampian Emerald Celtic Supporters Club. And then I had a year in Edinburgh. I was going with the Heriot Watt Celtic Supporters Club as well. And even when I was doing my press association training in Newcastle, I was going up with the Tyneside CSC as well. So I've always been going to Celtic games and connected to Celtic games. I think the last couple of years is my worst run of going to games, only managing a couple of seasons. But since being in London, I had to give up my season ticket just because I wasn't going to be able to travel as often. And yeah, that was one of the hardest things to do, actually. But I still managed to make about maybe 12 to 15 games a season, including European aways and things. So it's my passion. I absolutely love the club and everything that goes with it as well. So it's a huge part of my life, Celtics, and that will never change as well. I'm just trying to raise my daughter that way as well.
Best way. The best
Especially
way
down in London with our English accent now as well. It's
it's the best way ever, mate. Obviously, we share that passion with you. As I say, we've been doing this podcast now for a couple of years now, and myself and Ryan could talk Celtic every day, probably every minute of the day if we had an opportunity to do it. So any chance and any excuse we get to come on here and do that, mate, then obviously, as I said, we share that passion with you, Anthony. But what I wanted to say there, Anthony, obviously growing up a Celtic fan that you are and obviously still are, what was it that made you then want to get into the kind of media industry then? What was it? Was it a family member that maybe inspired you to do it, or?
No, not really. I think like both my parents are in like either science and health sort of backgrounds, and so were their parents. But no, I was just always. I think it was suggested by one of my primary school teachers at St Joseph's Primary School in Aberdeen. I think we used to write. On Monday mornings we used to have to write in our jotters like what we did at the weekend or something about your weekend. I used to just write Celtic match reports, and if the teachers were suggesting, oh, maybe you could do a career in sports journalism, and sort of always appealed to me. I remember like as a kid, like 8, 9 years old, commentating on Champions League games on my Talk Boy and things like that. It was just always something that interested me. And very early on in my teenage years, I was told by one of my teachers at school that like work experience is always the best way to get into journalism. So I started doing that in my local paper from like 13, 14 onwards. And then from 16 onwards, I was always going to, during the summer holidays or Easter holidays, I would always do like a week work experience with my local paper, covering like Aberdeen games or Highland League games, and also doing the news side of things as well. And it got to the stage, I mean, I was in 6th year at school and I only needed to pass my higher English. So I just thought, I'm definitely passing my higher English. That's all I need to do. And so I sort of mucked about a wee bit. I was doing just doing other things. I was doing like my SFA coaching badges. I was doing coaching the first year football team at our school. And I then got so distracted and I didn't pass my higher English. So I'm a journalist who's not got his higher English pass mark. So because of the work experience that I'd done and the amount of published work that I had, the Robert Gordon's University in Aberdeen basically said, well, if you can do a year at Telford College in Edinburgh in foundation journalism, then we'll put you straight in second year. So you don't really miss out on a year. So that was quite good. It was almost like a conditional offer. And so I did a year in Edinburgh, and you had to pass like law, news writing, video journalism, all that kind of thing, shorthand as well. I think that's what a lot of people don't realise in journalism. You often need shorthand because in court you can't record. So it's like learning a whole new language. Mm-hmm. I still use it today, actually. So I'm very grateful for it. So you have to pass by, I think at college I needed to pass at 80 words per minute. And then for a press association, you needed to do 100 words per minute. So I did pass that at Telford College, and then I got into second year at Robert Gordon's University. But after 2 months, I was offered a job at my local paper, the Aberdeen Evening Express, to become a trainee sports journalist, and they were going to fast track me through my exams and things. And I think that was the hardest part for me to tell my parents and my grandparents, who had all been through uni, who all like swore by, oh, you need to get a degree. I would have been the first in my family not to get a degree if I dropped out of uni to go and take this job. And that was there was about maybe a few days where I was trying to convince them, well, not really convince them, because they were going to support me whatever I did, but but both my parents by then were university lecturers as well. One at the uni that was there, so that I was going to be going, that I was at. And so that was the harder bit, to basically say, no, journalism is more about experience, and this is where it's got me so far. I've been offered a job before I've even finished a degree. They're going to fast track me through all my exams with Press Association, and that's what happened. So I took the job I was mainly covering Peterhead, the Highland League, and the rest of what was the SPL then. And the two main sports journalists were covering Aberdeen and Scotland. But then as you progressed, I started covering Aberdeen games, including Europa League games, and Scotland as well, home and away, which was good. And then to complete my sort of senior exams, to become a fully qualified journalist, I had to do a spell on news. And I started realising, I mean, Aberdeen's a fairly small place. Stuff your mates mates are all in the sort of oil industry and everything like that. And things, you had good sources, basically, to make front page news. I'll put it that way. And so I was enjoying that. I was enjoying doing the news side of it, and went down to Newcastle, completed my exams in shorthand, English law, Scots law, had to do all that, and continued on as a news journalist, actually, until the last year at the Evening Express. I was there for 5 years, and I felt like I was doing well in news. I was picking up awards, which was nice as well, to be recognised. And that I started to do like a broadcast role online. So I'd pick like the main story of the day and do like a broadcast piece, and it'd be like a video package. We launched a channel called EETV, and that was doing quite well. And then I got an offer to come down to London and work for the Mail Online. Perhaps for all my sins, I don't agree with the Mail politically at all. I'm complete opposite from that. But Mail Online, for a career move, was brilliant for me, because you're working for the biggest news website in the world. I was doing news, so I wasn't really covering politics or anything like that, although there was a lot of elections. Brexit vote happened, Donald Trump came in, so there was plenty of political news still there. But I still always liked the sports news side of it. So a lot of the sports news stories were given to me. Like I covered Leicester winning the league, but like the sort of newsy angle, what it meant for the city and the like sort of diverse community that was in Leicester. Also remember the Chapecoense plane crash in Brazil, which I covered as well. So I was still doing a lot of sports news stories while I was there. And then I actually took a year and a half out of the mainstream media. I mean, Mail Online, it was a sort of brutal environment, as in it was quite a tough place to work. It was 100 miles an hour all the time, but it still had that old school newsroom mentality, with a lot of the news editors and above, like from the traditional newspapers. So I did take a year and a half out of that, because I was offered a job at Kika Media, which was really different. It was like a new media company which did like paid partnerships with various companies, and we were doing videos with Premier League footballers. And that's where I started to build up a lot of good contacts with agents and players and things like that, because they would want to do these videos. So it was always promotional stuff. They were never going to look bad in this. It was always going to be promotional things. So, for example, ahead of the World Cup in 2018, we did stuff with the England team chef and like Harry Kane and Eric Dyer and a few of the England players cooking the meals that they were going to eat in Russia, and doing like a ready, steady cook sort of thing. And it just became like fun videos. And that was sold to Emirates Airline, who put that as part of their, if you're in-flight entertainment and you click sports, you'd be able to get, in 2018, you'd have been able to get that on a flight. So it was very different to what I was used to, but it taught me a bit more about video production, and it gave me amazing contacts, which I now use here for agents and players and people within football. And yeah, just before the pandemic hit, I was offered the job at Sky Sports News to be the news editor there. So it's always been my dream to work at Sky Sports News, and more so because it's the sports news channel, and that's what I really enjoy doing. I like transfers, I like investigations, I like reporting on the news side of the sport, rather than being at a game and just interviewing a manager before or after, because I think that could get, people do love that as well, but in terms of, because I've had that mix of news, I still love the news side of it. And I think for me, it would get a bit tedious just interviewing the manager after a game, saying, "Oh, it was a tough," or before a game, "It's going to be a tough game," or "We're looking for 3 points," that kind of thing. That doesn't excite me. That actual news about sport, like transfers or doing investigations or reporting on big issues like discrimination in sport, which I do a lot of, that's the kind of news I like to report on. And so that's why Sky Sports News was a good fit for me, and that's why it was like always a dream for me to work here.
Amazing. And obviously you've obviously spent a lot of time and what I would say is earning your stripes to then work your way up the ladder to get to Sky Sports News. But you said at the very beginning when you started chatting there that at school you used to write Celtic match reports. You're no free 1 or 2 nights a week to give a wee man lessons here, are you? Some of his post-match reports, man, are absolutely murder. So I'm kind of looking for a tutor for poor Ryan here to maybe give him a hand. To be fair, personally, I think that's why also he asked me to come on board to the podcast as well, was obviously to help him out, Anthony, but no, I'm only kidding. I'm only joking. But Ryan, I think that's quite interesting, mate, and it obviously shows and gives an insight there to, we look at media and people that do one job, but all in all, mate, they probably had to do more than one job to get to the position that they're in, at the moment. Because it's very easy to have an opinion of someone when they're in media, or if they do like reporting, or if it's weather, if it's new, regardless of what it is they're doing, you don't realise the work that these people go through individually to then get to that position. And it's a bit like football; you've got to go through academies to get to that point. So I think that's quite an interesting insight from Anthony there.
Yeah, it's not a case of it's like football. What Anthony started when he was very young, doing small things. And then the small things lead to bigger things and bigger things. Same as football. You start at boys' club, then you go to academies, pro youths, then you lead up to obviously the path in the first team. And obviously, I didn't realise as much as journalism is as much as that. I didn't think you had to go through and pass at uni and pass higher English. And I'm not saying I just thought you turned up and done writing, but I didn't think it was as logical as that, as everything you had to do to get to the stages. Let's be fair, JP, he's an award-winning journalist, so it's not just a case of turning up and just writing a match report. There's a lot more into that and a lot more qualifications to get to that level. So definitely, JP, in terms of that side of it, it just shows you how much you need to do to get to work with Sky Sports, to get to work with Mail Online. It's not just a case of turning up and just passing a wee exam and that's you. And a journalist, it's a lot more than it's just as a footballer. People just think you're good at football and that's how you get a contract. It's more than that. It's your determination, how you live outside, how you live in the media. There's loads of topics inside football, and it's obviously the same as journalism. So it's a good insight, JP, how he's got to Sky Sports, because it just shows you the work that they do behind the scenes. I think you've seen, I'm guessing Anthony could be the same, I don't know, the same level as Romano, the agent Romano, the media guy Romano. He's on his phone all the time, and that just shows you how busy these guys are for their job, and they're letting people know the insights. And sometimes, mate, like you say, mate, we maybe on the podcast, sometimes we give media a bit of jerk in terms of their opinions and what they think about Celtic and other things, but maybe sometimes you're thinking, right, there's maybe a reason why they're saying that, there's a logical reason why, but like you say, us as fans, we sometimes overreact. He's slagging our club, why is he saying that? And then you realise there's maybe a reason why he's got to that level to say that. So sometimes maybe us, okay, right, maybe it's a reason why he's saying it, or a reason why he's saying these words. Because you know me, mate, I'm not a big wordy person, I like to keep it short. So, but no, it's a good insight there for Anthony, mate, and it just shows you that it's not just a case of getting a job, doing a bit of news feeding, and then you're away. It must be quite especially in London, JP, it must be quite hectic.
No, listen, it's not. If journalism was that easy, mate, everybody would be doing it. So it's not for everybody. It's not for it's for an individual that's enthusiastic about it. They've got the drive. They've got that energy and will. It's like football, Ryan. You've got to have that desire, and to do journalism and that side of it, to be in the media, and you've got to have the desire and the will to get up in the morning, and you're going to have a lot of information in your head in one day, and I suppose a good thing with journalism, it's one of the jobs, mate, that probably no 2 days are the same in terms of what you're going to be doing, the people you're going to be speaking to, interacting with, you know, people that you get to meet. And as Anthony quite said there, he's built up a lot of contacts throughout his time of doing it. Anthony, obviously now you're at Sky Sports and you've worked your way up the ladders, mate. Have you been in the same role now? Like, have you done this role now for quite a period of time, or again, like, is it like in Sky Sports? What did it do? Did it give you so much there, and then you get training maybe somewhere else, and then you go? Is it that kind of industry? Do you get like moved about, or do you get your allocated section, and then that's you go and you do that?
It just depends. I think they're quite good at playing to people's strengths in terms of what they can bring and what they can offer. Obviously, there's so much to Sky Sports News. It's not just the TV channel. There's the website. There's all the social media channels, and there's just so a news editor. I don't think a lot of people outside journalism really know what a news editor is. News editor basically heads up the news gathering operation. So when I'm on shift, I'm basically in charge of the news gathering operation, and basically, along with the producer, will decide what goes out, what information we've got, and what we should report on, what should go at the top of the hour, what should go in like part 3, part 4, and what are our main stories, what we're going to get in, what should we chase further. And a lot of that is delegating to reporters and ask and various other news gatherers and trying to get the story. And people have got certain ins with certain people and certain clubs and all that. Sort of everyone's got their own sort of niche as well. So it's quite a big responsibility being a news editor in any news organisation. But for a live TV channel, it's quite a lot of pressure. But and during the transfer windows, because I obviously work on a lot of my own stories as well, in terms of news gathering in general, but I do a lot of our Hate Won't Win campaign. I lead our editorial coverage on that. So a lot of the time I'm chasing either social media companies or clubs or police or courts, trying to see what has happened with this investigation into racism or homophobia, not to basically holding power to account. Because if a football club is saying they are investigating something, or the police are saying they're investigating something, quite often we found a year later they still say they're investigating and nothing's happened. But if we can keep putting pressure on them, it forces them to act. And we've noticed that happen quite a bit since we've changed our tactics on how we report on stories of discrimination. But transfer-wise, so during the transfer window, we sort of come into a smaller group of, certain people come into a smaller group of the transfer desk. And it's usually headed up by Lyle Thomas. I've headed up in previous years as well. But then on deadline day, myself and Lyle will sort of head up that news gathering operation. And we both work on our own transfer stories as well. I still tap into a lot of my old Scottish contacts and also new ones in terms of Celtic, because before I came to London, I didn't have major contacts at Celtic. That has been built up since being at Sky, actually. So, we sort of, everyone, well, certain people have got certain ins with certain clubs, so we'll work together on stories, or certain agents. And at Sky, I think we go. So a lot of the time, a lot of criticism I get quite often in a window is, "Oh, you're a day late," or something, or someone else has broken that. Well, perhaps one of the more frustrating sides of being at Sky is that we are the host broadcaster for the league and for these clubs. So there's a business interest with these clubs as well. And without going into too much detail, we have to go through more stringent processes and further checks to get something out there. So then perhaps someone at the Daily Record or the Sun or whatever, they would get it from their contact, and they often report it or double source it and then report it. So we have more stringent processes to go through before something is out there, and that's quite often why, I think, more so because we've got that business relationship, but also because we don't care about. Yes, it'd be great to be first, but we'd rather be right or be the most up to date with the information. Usually, the way I would work on a transfer story is whatever source I've got the original information from, I would then check it with either the player's side and both clubs. And that includes if it's an international club, I would reach out to them or try and find a contact who's got an in with them to go to them. So it's that's often the case. So quite often we end up reporting on something. Quite often we are first with things as well, but sometimes there is a delay in what we can report, and there's so much because of the business relationship. There's so many things that we leave out as well, and we just can't report. We don't want to annoy a certain contact because we're speaking to all sides of it before we put it out. Everyone has an agenda. The buying club has an agenda. The selling club has an agenda. The player's side has an agenda as well, whether that's agent or the player and his reps. So you've got to juggle that, because sometimes you get different bits from different sides, and sometimes it can sort of contradict each other a little bit. Someone saying, "Oh, they're not budging on £5 million or whatever," or they're not. We're just sorting out the clauses, or you'll have a club that's saying, "Oh no, we're really confident we're going to get them," or whatever, and then the agent saying, "No, I wouldn't go that far. We're speaking to a few clubs," that kind of thing. That can happen. So there's so many aspects and variables to a football transfer that people don't realise. I think quite often, I think there's a lot more information out there now of how a transfer can work, but I've also got to remember, I'm just talking about feedback I get if I put out a story and people get frustrated. Usually vent their frustration at me, but really they're frustrated at the club or something like that. So it's people want, quite often the thing is, why is it taking so long? Any update on this, or what's the hold up on this? And really, there's just not a hold up. It's just things take time. And transfer negotiation, if you're negotiating your life, your future, moving your family, this all takes time. Where are you going to live? Where your kid's going to go to school? People forget the human aspect of a football transfer. Imagine you were just taking your whole family away to a random place in Europe, a place that you don't know the language. Especially a lot of the Celtic players have come from the Far East now, so there's a lot to it, and I just don't think people really appreciate. It's understandable people don't appreciate it, because it's so easy to get desensitized to football and the business side of football. But I think people should always remember there's a human element to it, and there's still the same processes to get into another country or to make a transfer that you have to do. There's contracts have to be signed, lawyers have to look over certain things and make sure the deal is, we're talking millions of pounds usually. But when you're parting way with millions of pounds, everything needs to be checked over properly, gone through like 4 or 5 times, and one little change can make the whole process, delay the whole process, because they've got to check it again 5 times, even though there's just one little change in the contract or a clause or whatever. So there's so many aspects to a transfer that could possibly see what people describe as a delay, and things just take time, or sometimes it can get done quickly, but there's so many aspects to it. Or you could be in a situation like, was it Maatsen going to Burnley, where the clubs agreed the fee, Chelsea and Burnley agreed the fee, and the player didn't want to go. So all that process can happen, and then sometimes the player just says, no, I don't want to go there. So there's just so many variables to it, and so it's really important for us to sort of, when we're speaking to all sides of the deal or the potential deal, that what is opinion from them, or what is actually fact, what's happened, because there's always an agenda, there's always a slant put on it, and then we put out a form of words that everyone would be happy with. Sometimes it doesn't work out like that. Sometimes you do get a bit of a complaint. Oh, why you shouldn't have said that. We don't agree. Don't think that's the situation. That can happen. It's hard to please everyone, but we'll put out a form of words that we understand to be the situation, and then that's usually how we'll report it. And we always do channel first in terms of, I'll send out an email to, like, so if, for example, if it's a Celtic transfer, I would write up the words, send it to we have a sort of latest news email, and that means it can be reported now, and we'll send it to there, and then usually goes on the transfer blog first, and then I'll put it out as a tweet myself, and then so we always do channel first, and then it goes out. So that's usually how the operation works. And there's so many forms of getting the information as well. Sometimes you don't get it right at the start. In an ideal world, a journalist would want a running commentary from the start of someone being interested to the deal being done.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't always happen. And especially if a club like Celtic, who were making so many transfers in the summer and involved in so many negotiations, you sometimes only get a contact's time for about 5 minutes of that day, and that 5 minutes could be at 10 o'clock at night. So you've got to be, you're always on your phone, you're always on WhatsApp. 90% of your work during the transfer window is done on WhatsApp, and there's no switching off, because sometimes a contact can come to you and you know you've only got that 5 minutes of them being online, but they're speaking to you to get what you need and get the information. And you always want to know that that information is the most up-to-date information as well, because quite often if you get it at like 10 o'clock at night, you can't verify it with the other sources that you'd want to go to. Then becomes the morning, it might have moved on. So there's lots, it's high pressure. And then as soon as you hit that send button to report, there's always that feeling of, well, yeah, you're confident with the information you've got, because you trust your sources, you know who your sources are, and that gives you that confidence. But you always know that something could change as well. Something could change in an hour. And that's the nature of the business, but that's what makes it exciting as well. There is a lot of excitement working on football transfers. It's not something I thought I would really, when I joined Sky, that I would really get into that much, but it sort of made my own way through it, just because I had the contacts through agents and certain clubs and certain sources elsewhere. So that sort of blended into the transfer desk by reporting on these stories. So it's been good. It's good, but it is high pressure, and it is you've just got to be non-stop. Sometimes you can be away where you're like, I remember when Lager Belka happened, I was away with my family in Devon, and just a few days, a long weekend really, and then I remember sitting at a dinner table at a Lebanese restaurant and getting a message saying, "Oh, he's agreed terms." So that was going to be happening, and then I just feel the need to then go and put in calls and put in other texts to get the full story before I report it, and then run all the checks and everything, because there is a long process to it before it goes out there, and then I think it got reported in Sweden first that he'd agreed terms, and then the next morning I was at a stage where I could put it out. So that can happen. You can be, people forget that we also have personal lives. We're also doing it. Oh, why did you not know about this or whatever? And yeah, sometimes I didn't know about it until I asked about it. It got reported first somewhere else, and I've gone and checked it out and followed it up and maybe moved it on a little bit. So that can happen. But I mean, that's life, and that's the nature of our business. And try not to get too involved in the noise, but it can be frustrating sometimes.
I think, JP, it's Anthony spot on in terms of some criticism that obviously fans give to some media outlets and journalists, and he's spot on in what he says. I've seen it myself, mate. People saying that you're late, or he said this, or that person said this, or that account said this, and like Anthony says, the fact that Sky Sports as well, they've got to be prim and proper. The information's got to be spot on because it is nationwide, it's worldwide. It's probably one of the biggest news channels watched in terms of transfers and deadlines, and you're probably talking millions and millions of people watching that every day, especially deadline day. So, but just in general, Anthony, one of the definitely in terms of what I look at, he's one of the most trusted sources on Twitter in general. So when Anthony normally says something, me and you chatted, Anthony said that's right, it must be close and it must be right. And that's because Anthony's worked very hard to build up his sources. He knows that when he's putting out something, a tweet, then it's actually good for the people who are going to watch us when it's out, and me and you in general, that we know when Anthony's got something or somebody who he works with in Sky, it's roughly, I just say with Celtic, it's roughly going to be spot on, or the transfer fee spot on, or the agent they're dealing with. You know that that's the way it's working. So it's good to know for future reference. And we already knew, mate, that Anthony was a trusted source because 9 times out of 10, everything he's put up through Sky, it's roughly happened. But it's a wee question.
Maritine, Ryan, is normally on Twitter if Celtic are rumoured by anybody. My routine is now I wait to see what Anthony's got to say before I even entertain a conversation about it, because the amount of nonsense that gets bandied about all our social media nowadays, if you're gullible and you're quite easily led, then I'm afraid it's I can imagine seeing what you see on social media must be like walking down Blackpool Pleasure Beach and looking at all the lights. Just everything all lights up in front of you, because that's what Twitter is mainly about, or X is what it's called now. I know it's still called Twitter to many folk, but they've got this new brand now. It's called X. But no, you mentioned earlier on about Romano, Ryan. I think a lot of his work's guesswork as well. Like sometimes you're like, there's no substance behind what you're actually saying there. Like, you'd be reading an article that he's put out or something he's tweeted, and you'd be like, I think he's just sat in a room and made up a rumour himself there. I think, it's like, I know Anthony's talking about people's strengths at Sky Sports. We always have a laugh on here, Anthony. When you said Sky try and work to people's strengths, and we're still trying to figure out what it is Chris Boyd does and brings to Sky, and what kind of strength that is a guy's got that brings to that channel, because we're kind of like, I think he's just there to wind people up. The way Hugh Keevan sits in Clyde One on a Monday and a Friday night, just sits and winds people up and says things for likes.
The only thing I can say to that is I think it's good that we've got Chris Sutton now to balance out. Because they're both winds up. They're both great TV, to be honest. Boydie and Chris Sutton. And I think it's great for Sky Sports that we've got both of them. And they can I think it's going to be quite fun over the next few years, just them winding each other up. And it does make good TV. And Boydie's a good laugh on TV as well. I know he's always winding up Celtic fans, and that's what he does. But I think a lot of people can take it as fair game, and I think Celtic fans now feel they've got someone who's got their back to wind up Rangers fans as well, which is all part of fun.
Absolutely, because when we heard Big Sutty was transferring over from, well, it's now TNT Sports, but obviously he was on BT Sport prior. I was kind of rubbing my hands. I was like, yes, you beauty. I hope he's on Scottish football, because if he's on Scottish football, we're going to have in for a juicy episode of the actual whatever the game may be. And so far, it's been bang on with the two of them, because Sutty keeps putting him on the spot, because he's been banging on about the pressure Michael Beale's been under. And Chris Boyd's been saying, yeah, he's under pressure. But Sutty keeps identifying, but Chris, what is he under pressure for? You need to tell us. Please tell us. We all want to know. And so that kind of ongoing banter there, you're right, Anthony. It's been pretty good. But the one thing I wanted to ask yourself, Anthony, is see when things don't go the way you maybe want them to. I'll give you an example. If you remember back to, Peter Odemwingie, when he turns up at QPR, and it turns out that he's not signing there, but there was a big hoo-ha about him signing. And then there was another one, obviously, on Christmas morning, good few years ago now. We all woke up to the news that Moussa Dembele had signed for Brighton. And so what happens then? Do you guys need to act quickly in order to then withdraw that information that's been put out, or
not really? Because
what happens then?
Because these are situations where something's changed, and I think fans aren't very forgiving. I think if people read the exact, I mean, our words are chosen very carefully as to what we put out most of the time, and it's you've got to be. I mean, I've been stung on one with the Ben Davies one. I'd said he'd signed a pre-contract, but he'd agreed the pre-contract and was going to sign. He had the paperwork. This was when he was at Preston, and from all sides saying the deal's done. It's got, as in general terms, Preston's. I mean, even after the whole thing happened, even Preston's chairman came out and said we were pretty certain he'd signed for Celtic. Neil Lennon said we were gazumped. So, but the wording that I put out on my tweet, it wasn't the wording that I put out in my email or what we put out on the story. We said has agreed a pre-contract. That was correct. He hadn't signed it, and that was a failing on my part. That wording was just wrong, and so we've got to be so careful. And because I've been stung on that, my philosophy now is, even though someone's told me it's signed, it's done, let the club announce it, it's done. We'll say agreed, because it's like, something could happen. You might sign it and not submit it, because a lot of things are done online now as well. And he might have someone could sign a contract but just not actually send it because Liverpool's come in or PSG's come in, that kind of thing. So I think quite often now with our reporting, I think at Sky we go up to the point of it's agreed. He's agreed a 4-year deal, whatever, and then we wait for the club to announce it that they have signed the player. So that's usually our process. I think most of the other journalists work that same way as well. But I mean, you get stung, but that was the information you've been given at that time, and so I don't know what I mean. Odin Wingy was when I was sort of a teenager as well, so I would have been like, what's happened here? This guy have got this wrong or something like that. But now you sort of know they were right at the time. He was going to go and sign for another club, but then but something changes. That's the kind of thing. So I think some people even I'm trying to think of a scenario. Was it what was the boy's name who went to Middlesbrough? Celtic signed Matt O'Reilly instead.
Oh, Riley McGree.
Riley McGree.
That's it. Yeah. So some newspapers in Scotland said it was done, that it was signed. And like our understanding was that he is verbally agreed to join Celtic, but he had a change of heart. And Middlesbrough were offering the whole Premier League. We're going to be in the Premier League next year, Cell, and we'll give you this amount and all that. So we chose Middlesbrough. So that can happen. But we didn't actually. We held on that story because I think from the players' side, it was, yes, he's verbally agreed, but there's still a chance that Middlesbrough could come in and hijack this. So we sort of sat on it, and the next morning that started to unfold, and by the evening we were able to report that it looks like that Ryan McGree is heading to Middlesbrough, not Celtic. And then I think Celtic lucked out with that because they got Matt O'Reilly in just a few days later. And what a signing he's turned out to be for 1.5 million or 1.2 million, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So, but that's what happens. Things change. And that, I think a lot of the time when people read, I say I could put out Celtic are interested in XXX. People see that as I'm saying Celtic are going to sign XXX. It's not my fault if the deal doesn't happen. It's not really anyone's fault if the deal doesn't happen. It just does. If you think about all the players Celtic are tracking, are interested in, there's a select few that make it to the media.
Yeah.
And just because we're saying they're interested in them doesn't mean they're not interested in other players for that position and that they'll go on to sign other players in that position. It's just the ones, sometimes we just get told certain ones, and they might be like third or fourth down the list. Yeah, there's an interest there, or he's on our radar, that kind of thing. But they know that they're actually going for, well, not actually going for something, or something's happened with initial talks there and they've gone for another target. That can happen. I think this window, the situation where that sort of happened was, I put a line about Mohamed Reda. And thankfully, Reda sort of saved me a few weeks ago by saying he actually spoke about Celtic's interest in the initial contact there. Whereas I think after putting out Reda, I think Rodgers 2 days later said he'd never heard of him. But that could have been the case, because if you think of quite a lot of the time at interest level, it doesn't make it to Rodgers. It doesn't make it to the manager. The recruitment team, the scouting department, recruitment team are the ones who are identifying targets, putting feelers out there through intermediaries to see, would they be interested in joining Celtic? Or, if they are, let's put them on the shortlist to bring to the manager, and we'll make up a smaller shortlist of targets that we go for. So there's a very good chance Rodgers didn't actually know about Mohamed Reda that as a player, and I think Ferreira as well at Gremio. Yeah. So that's quite a possibility. I have my doubts. I think he probably did know who they are, but he just knew that it wasn't going to happen. So that can happen, and so you have to deal with the sort of backlash as the person who's put it out, even though what you've said is correct. Celtic were interested, initial contact was made, but nothing's gone further. And the amount of players that happens to, and the amount of times that happens, is vast. There's so many people that will be contacted, so many players, so many targets, and until they know, usually they won't go for a player. In these days now, usually clubs won't go for a player unless they know they could have their head turned, or they are interested in the move. And that's why it's so surprising to see the situation, like I said, with Burnley and Chelsea, where the clubs agreed everything, and then the player was like, "No, I don't want to go to Burnley." So it's amazing you still get those situations, but it can happen.
It's interesting, JP, Anthony. Sorry, mate. It's interesting. Me and you were actually talking about that last night on the phone about. I know we want big quality for the Champions League, and we want to invest in better quality, obviously with the finances that we've now got and stuff. But like me and you spoke about all the time, mate, and if you watch the Sunderland documentary, that's probably a good analogy to use for this type of topic. Celtic might have 4, 5, 6, 7 players on a list for certain positions. If they don't, the way more about quality, Celtic might have went for the number one, just say it's a left back, because that seems to be one that I want to progress quite a lot in, and a lot of fans are the same. Because obviously with Burnley and Taylor right now, are they going to improve Europe? Probably nobody looks at it. Again, they could maybe in a few months they can get better, but right now as it stands, probably not. So we don't know if they I go for an £8 million. Like there was rumours, like I say rumours, we don't do rumours on here, but in the media there was rumours about the French boy from, I think it was Norwich, Mellon. There was rumours about that, right? So we could have went for him. But like Anthony says, it might have not got to the manager, it might have not got to the media, it might have not got to that stage where it got to the stage where our tops were taking place. So Celtic could have tried to get Mellon. They could have tried to go. I seen a link about the boy from Ipswich. We could have went to get 8 targets, but then it's went to the third. Right, okay, can I get the third one?
Leif Davis?
Yeah, that's it, yeah. So Davis, yeah. So it's the same with the boy like Palmer. Palmer might have not been the first choice. He might not have been the second choice, right? The third choice now, he's a third on the list. Now we can get him. So don't know what you think about that, JP. It's funny Anthony says that, because me and you actually got last night on the phone how that's the way it works. If you don't get the first target, right, go to the second. We'll go to the second, we'll go to the third. Like Anthony says, they get a short list, and I think sometimes fans, like Anthony says, because there's a verbally agreed or there's an interest, we're definitely going for him, and it does evolve like that.
Yeah. I think it's quite interesting, obviously, Anthony giving us that insight, Ryan, because I think a lot of people think most transfers start for the manager. So, like, he knows about everything that's going on, right? And I think Brendan himself gave an insight the other week when he mentioned about the recruitment team and what they do in terms of bringing players to him. He's giving players, and then he'll coach the players. So I think that But people just automatically assume Brendan's not in control of transfer business. That's not the way modern day football works.
Yeah.
Even Ange, when he was there, was given players brought to him by Matt Lawwell and the guys that he brought in to do that job. Because if you think people, the manager's got a hard enough job, try to select a team, keep a team fit, work out who's fit in the team, getting insights from, what's going on in the guy's family, what's going on in the background, is his head straight, there's players don't play because they're injured. They could not play because he's the wee virus this week, so he's maybe not been right in training, so I don't think he might be right here tactically for me to impose what we're going to try and do against this team at the weekend. A lot of people don't see that, mate. A lot of people just go, he's not on the team, he's not good enough to play with us.
Yeah.
That's the way people, in reality, I sit beside guys at Celtic Park that bang on about players and, they come away with the biggest load of nonsense you've ever heard. Like, there was one there, the big boy Kwon. I was at a game last week. Kwon's not getting a game for Celtic. You might hear this, boys. Kwon is not getting a game for Celtic because he doesn't understand English. Kwon's not playing for Celtic because he doesn't understand an Irish manager. This is what I've got to deal with on a day-to-day basis when you go to Celtic Park, mate. Honest to God. Anthony, you'll probably be pleased that you're not getting to most games now, mate, because this is what you're getting in beside, mate. That's the
same guy. That's the same guy. Is that the same guy who says that Samaras was Jack and Mackie's personal trainer?
There's another guy that sits behind me, and he's an older guy. He's about, I reckon he's in his 70s, Anthony. And he said when Jackie Marcus was at Celtic, he was talking to another guy, but he was doing it not that way. They do it loudly, and you can hear them. And he said, no, Big Samaras is still well involved with Celtic. And the guy's like that. How do you mean Samaras is still involved with Celtic? He's big Jackie Marcus, he's PA, personal assistant, personal trainer and all that. And you're like, where did you get that for?
I think he said maybe a few jars that morning.
You just sat in the pub with Jack and Victor before you came here and just come away with that rubbish, man. Honestly, but that's what I'm saying. That's where people's mindset is, lads, in terms of where they look at football. It's not until you get guys like Anthony coming on and telling stories and explaining to you how things actually work and work behind the scenes, because people think, we've not signed him. Celtic are no one to part with money, or they're no one to, they're no one to pay the money for the guy. Sometimes that's not how a transfer works. You don't just go, much is he? 16 million. We can't afford that. There's a negotiational process that must go on behind the scenes that you would say, right? And transfers are a really complex process as well. You're not just buying a player, you're buying everything that's involved with him as well. So football players now are brands, and you're buying that brand, but along with that brand comes his family and things that everything's got to be agreed, that things round about him's got to be looked after, and while he's trying to do his job in terms of being a footballer, but he's also got a personal life that people don't take into consideration as well. And like Anthony says, sometimes he might be away. I mean, he just told us there he was away with his family when Lagerbielke was getting announced. But again, I've noticed that, Anthony, with the last couple of transfers at Celtic, especially like, say, we had the lad Giannis on speaking to us from Greece. He actually had a chat with Ryan. I couldn't make it that day, I was busy. But he came on before Palma had signed for us. And the deal was still sort of going ahead and in the process of happening. And he gave us an insight into what type of player he was and, a wee bit about his background, etc. And again...
You didn't need to do that. You could have got all the insight from all the Rangers podcasts before.
Aye, that's true, aye.
But...
Aye, but apparently they weren't interested in him. Apparently,
no.
But yet they done a podcast about him.
The manager came out himself and says, "We went there, but it wasn't really something that we were willing to take up." It's maybe the fact that he's actually had to pay money for a guy.
The fact they can afford €5 million at
that. Instead of, because I don't think Aris would have took Kenzie to schools at the time, you know. But no, like I say, Anthony, it's something that I find it very interesting, you know, because like I say, there is a process behind a transfer. But when you see transfer deadline day, it just, I mean, from the naked eye watching the TV, it just looks like 100 mile an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got guys out on the road, and you've also got guys in the studio. And every time the studio comes back on off an advert, it's different people. It's all kind of. So obviously, are you based in the studio that day? Then do you do a lot of your work from the studio? Then
Yeah, I do all my work in the newsroom pretty much.
Right.
Very rarely do work from home, and well, during the transfer window, it would be work anytime from wherever, on holiday even.
Mm-hmm.
But it's in terms of deadline day, like I was up about maybe 7-8 o'clock, starting making phone calls and getting texts in. Deadline day is great because you know there's going to be an end to whatever story you're putting out or whatever story you're working on. So if someone says, well, we're actually interested and we've made initial contact for this player or whatever, it's great because you know there's going to be an end game here. You can put it out in 12 hours. He's either signed or he hasn't. So that's the buzz you get from that. You know the stories are going to work quickly, and you sort of realize contacts will talk to you a bit more when they can, and they'll give you more assertive information because they know they can't really fob you off because they can't say no, we're not interested in this player, and then he turns up at the gates of this stadium a few hours later. So it's you usually find that people are more open to speaking on deadline day, your contacts, even though they're really busy. Sometimes you just get a yes or a no or a thumbs up. Are we okay to say this? And thumbs up on WhatsApp. So that's sort of what it's like. I mean, I went in about midday, needed to make sure I got all the treats and the snacks because it's going to be a long night. I
did see your photo. You put a photo on Twitter that day. I did see that. I was laughing.
It's become tradition that I bring in the tonics, just have a just Dharma
You're glad Lee Griffiths in Australia now because he'd have loved to join you if you've seen that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Dharma Chef loves a tea cake, so he's always at them straight away. But yeah, and then just working on the deals that you're sort of involved in and the stories that you're doing. I usually put in a text to quite a few my strong contacts or even ones that I just speak to now and again, just saying anything you've got going on. Usually good luck as well, because it's a big day for them. It's like a lot of their income relies on deals getting done and things like that. So it's just wish them well, and just if there's anything we can report on, then just give us a shout. Then that usually happens. You're usually getting called, you're usually getting texts left, right, and centre on different things that have just come out of the blue, things you didn't even, on players that you didn't even know your certain contacts had dealings with and things. Because that's the other thing about with agents, they can also act as intermediaries, so they might not be the agent of a certain player, but they are helping a club work on this deal. So that can also be a source of information as well. So there's just so much going on, and when you get into the newsroom, the place is just buzzing. It's 100 mile an hour. I mean, it's usually buzzing with breaking news in general, but I mean, there's breaking news every few minutes on deadline day. There's always clubs announcing transfers, and we report on every transfer from the EFL, the Premier League, the Scottish Premiership, even Scottish Lower League as well, and then all the European ones. And we've got bureaus in Germany, we've got Sky Germany, we've got bureaus in Italy, Sky Italy, where Fabrizio sort of learnt his trade at Sky Italy, as well, working under Gianluca Di Marzio, who is the original transfer guru. Who still works at Sky Italy. So we're constantly in contact with them. I mean, if there's something going on with a German club, then we'll reach out to the reporters who work on that, and we'll work together on putting out a form of words to report the story. That always happens. I mean, we dealt with Sky Germany a lot with the Harry Kane situation, still doing that with the whole buyback clause, or is there not a buyback clause? So Sky Germany getting different information, Spurs putting out different information. It's you have to sort of, like I was saying about agendas, we have to come up with a form of words that's going to suit both, and is actually what we understand to be the situation. So there's a lot going on, and deadline day, like I said, there's going to be an end to whatever you put out, or whatever story you're working on. It either collapses or doesn't go ahead, or the player signs. So that's the buzz you get from it. And I mean, sometimes a lot of contacts, the business is done. They feel they're happy with their business, unless something drastically changes, that's us done. On deadline day, we rarely like to kill the buzz straight away. So I wouldn't often we wouldn't say that, but also you want to just be mindful of that domino effect. Things change, and it's not worth saying that someone's done their transfer business at 3 p.m. because something could change, and there's 9 hours left. You can maybe say it towards 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, but be sure, because you never know what could change. I mean, in terms of Celtic, you could have had, I mean, Leeds put in a £10 million bid, didn't they, for Matt O'Reilly? If they'd upped it to a position where Celtic were maybe looking to negotiate, maybe double that, maybe just under double that, then things could have changed. There would be, I think, a lot of people perhaps thought that Bernardo was brought in just on the off chance Hatate or O'Reilly maybe left last minute, and Celtic covering their bases, which is a logical thing to do as well. So there's so many aspects to certain things. As I say, you just don't know what you're going into. Every day at work, it's like that working at Sky Sports News. But more so on transfer deadline day, you just have no idea who's going to be the next, who's going to be the target, who's going to sign who. I mean, using Rangers as the example, Aaron Ramsey to Rangers last year just stunned everyone. No, I mean, that was the big. Christian Eriksen signed for Man United that day, that deadline in January. But Aaron Ramsey was the story. I think that was just like, that just came out of nowhere. So things, and people thought it was a joke at first. So that can happen. And that's where the excitement comes. I think for us on deadline day, I think Amrabat getting done late was the huge one, from what I can remember, of a big transfer that didn't come out of nowhere. Then we knew there was interest, but then Man United just went out and got him on deadline day. So that kind of thing can happen, and that's where the excitement comes from. And it's just all about making sure you're still doing your stringent processes and checks as much as you can. It's not the same on deadline day. It's a bit different because your sources of information are being a bit more open, and so something is the case. And yeah, it's just, there is that different feel to it. The only way I can describe it to anything else I've had in my career are election nights. When I've worked in news, and there's a similar feeling to that, but this perhaps is more 100 miles an hour because there's an actual deadline to it. And I think off air, you were asking me if we have our own deadlines. Well, newspapers, you would, but Sky Sports News, it's a 24-hour rolling news channel. Some things we might hold. We might say, let's sit on this, see how it develops a bit, because not the information sketchy, but it's a bit vague at the moment, or someone is saying that's not the case, or this could change quickly, that kind of thing. So sometimes we'll sit on a story and just let it develop, let other media report on it for a while, and then when we're at a position where we feel it's strong enough for us to go with, then we'll do it. So that's the kind of editorial decisions we have, and as a news editor and as one of those the news editors for the transfer desk as well during transfer windows, those are the decisions I'd be making with other reporters on certain stories they've got on different transfers, and we'd come together with the producer and the other people on the transfer desk to decide what we do with something, or whether we go with it. Because quite often you'll have scenarios where someone has made a bid for a player, the club that has that player are quite happy to say that we've rejected a bid for that player because it makes them look good.
Yep.
And then you'll go to the other club, and the information from the other club is that, no, we didn't make a bid for the player, because they know it's been rejected, and it's easier for them to say, nah, we didn't, because they want to save face. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Similar, perhaps, people might use that scenario with Palma as well, where information, when Celtic were signing him, information coming from the other side was, no, they weren't interested, when Palma in his press conference admitted there was interest.
Yeah. He did say that, because he also then said when he found out, obviously, Celtic's interest, there was only one team he wanted to even entertain in terms of a proper conversation. But what I wanted to ask you, Anthony, is in terms of when the transfer window closes, obviously you do a lot of reports on Celtic, being a Celtic fan, which is fine. Is there then a quiet spell, or do you guys still get information that would lead to potential recruitment for the next window? Does that still happen, or do you have like a quiet spell for a while before the next window, or how does that work?
Yeah, possibly. And I think it's, just to address the first thing you said, I think it's almost by chance, I think, that, I'm a Celtic fan, but also report a lot on Celtic. It's just the contact, maybe because I'm more interested. It's contacts I've built up, but only since I've been at Sky. It's just the way it's worked out with where I feel I've got strong sources at. So, but in terms of after the window, it's changed a little bit. I mean, the Saudi Premier League has sort of changed things a little bit, because their window is a bit later, and they've been buying lots of players from Europe this summer. There are other windows that are still open. Like I remember after deadline day, people asking me, "Oh, did the Yeti's deal collapse?" No, Turkish window was just open for a bit longer, so that there wasn't a rush to do that. So there's other. I think the Greek transfer window is open a bit longer as well. So if Haksabanovic didn't move to Stoke, Powick would have been in a strong position to go and sign him, perhaps even on a permanent deal as well. But no, Haksabanovic went to Stoke, so that was fine. Yeah, you get a lot of information. I mean, I'll still keep in touch with contacts, and quite often there's a debrief at the end, and we sort of, when you're speaking to other contacts, you just ask, "Oh, what happened with this person in the end," that kind of thing, or what happened with the interest there. And it might be just, we'll look at it again in January. I usually try to refrain from putting out stuff straight after deadline day to say someone is going to go in for someone in January, because so much can happen between now and January. Priorities change. You could have for example, Celtic were not looking for a centre-back this summer after they'd signed Lagerbielke and Nawrocki. And then they have an injury crisis. And then they need to sign a centre-back in the last week of the window, who it knows is just going to be coming in as almost like an emergency loan. Because Celtic have got, 6 centre-backs on their books, and 4 of them were injured. That's including Kobayashi as well. But the three of their main centre-backs were injured, and then Kobayashi. And so you're left with Scales and Lagerbielke, and they needed to bring someone in, so they went for Nat Phillips. So that can happen, and if someone could have like Abada's out for till maybe February, March next year.
Yeah.
So it's it's quite a worrying, not a worrying situation. That can happen, as in like you could suddenly feel like, oh, this is our plan for the January transfer window. We've missed out on a few targets here, but we're going to go for these in January. And suddenly you have a winger who's out for 6 months or 5 months, and then you feel you might need to go and buy a winger. I'm not saying that's what Celtic are going to do, but I'm just saying that can happen. Your priorities change, and things can change over the course of a season. Kyogo could get injured. Touch wood, that doesn't happen. That's the kind of thing that means that changes priorities. And like in the summer, one of Celtic's priorities was a goalkeeper, and that didn't happen because they didn't want to have 4 goalkeepers on their books. They were looking to get Siegrist to move out on loan, but he didn't want to move out on loan, which is fair enough. I think he maybe, from his side, I can see it's fair enough, because I think after pre-season, he could maybe see that Joe Hart was maybe a few blunders away from being dropped, and he'd be the number 1, potentially. And the Champions League bonus at Celtic is very good. So why would he leave? You can understand from his perspective why he would want to stay.
He's not in the Champions League squad, though.
Yeah, I know. That's the other thing, because Celtic needed to fill their criteria as well. So it hasn't worked. But you can see his thinking during the summer.
Yeah.
As to why he wouldn't leave. So while Celtic had put feelers out and had a look at certain goalkeepers, they weren't in a position to go out and go and get one. Even though
you're talking about goalkeepers, sorry to cut you off, Anthony. See the Croatian goalkeeper, was he a proper target for Celtic?
Yeah, Livakovic was a target for Celtic. Yeah, he was. If Celtic were able to move Ben Siegrist on, I think we might have seen a big go in, because if you saw the money that he went for, I think it's a deal worth £6.7 million or £6.5 million. But the initial fee was £5.7 million. So that's that's in Celtic's budget. His wages are high, yes, but that's in Celtic's budget. And that's just the scenario of there's so many variables to things. So there would have needed to be a domino effect for Celtic to go out and actually pursue getting a goalkeeper. Yes, feelers were put out, and I mean, Livakovic was keen on quite a few clubs and keen to speak to them, but in the end, Fenerbahce were the only ones that made a proper bid for him. So he ended up there.
That's mental, because I think that goalkeeper especially is able to play at a much better level than, no disrespect, but where he is at the moment in terms of Fenerbahce. I think if you look at his World Cup alone, I think he must have saved the most penalties in the World Cup I've ever seen a goalkeeper save. If no, he's right. He's definitely right up there. But no, to me, the Ben Siegrist thing's really baffling, Anthony, because in my opinion, mate, he was never ever going to challenge Joe Hart to become the number 1 at Celtic. The more reason for that is because if you look at Celtic's bench, Scott Baines, there is the next go-to goalkeeper that's always on the bench. So he's not even getting an opportunity. So for the player himself to maybe look, I know what you're saying in terms of looking at the prospects there, but you've got to eye up that situation as well, in my opinion. That you're not getting a game, you're not getting near the team. You're lucky if you're getting a game of 5 or 6 twice a week with the team. And you're then, you've went for that to not want to pursue. You've came for Dundee United where you play every week. You're the mainstay goalkeeper. You've then came to Celtic. Obviously, it's a bigger opportunity. I understand that. But then very quickly, you realise that you're not going to be the actual goalkeeper for the club. Because I'm sure he's not a silly lad. He must understand his position at the club at the moment, and he must see that. It's very similar to James McCarthy. I don't understand why I do understand it from a financial side of things in terms of why would they want to move, because he's probably not going to get the same deal of money that he's on just now in terms of his wage packet. But that, again, surely being a footballer, regardless of what position you play, the idea is to go and play football, is it not? Rather than just sit in the wilderness somewhere.
Yeah,
So to me, that's just silly.
I think in hindsight for him, he'll be thinking, this hasn't worked out. Not in the Champions League squad. He's doesn't even seem to be. He's now dropped behind Bain, so it might be because he was refusing to move. Who knows? I don't know that for sure, but it does seem strange for someone to go from second choice to third choice like that. But during the summer and at pre-season, I think you could. Joe Hart's performances were quite dodgy during pre-season. He made quite a few blunders, I think, in each game that he played in. And I think there was one. Was it the Bilbao game that he didn't even play? Was it Siegrist and Bain that played a half each? It was one of those games. I think it was Bilbao. So I think Rodgers was there just seeing, well, what are these two like? Are they even close to getting near Joe Hart? Which the answer, I think, is no. But there's also the recognition that Joe Hart is aging. At moments, you can still see he's a top-class goalkeeper, but at more often than not now, you're starting to see there is an aging process catching up with him now. He served Celtic well for 2 years, but Celtic are going to need to address that situation soon.
Yeah.
And what I think Celtic ideally would have wanted was to be able to move Siegrist on and bring someone in, not necessarily Livakovic, because it might not have got him in the end, but he was gettable, definitely, and bring someone of that quality in to challenge Hart. And I think what you would have maybe seen, if it was someone like Livakovic, you would have seen him eventually become the number one quite quickly.
Yeah.
So, and Joe Hart would have been a brilliant person to have on the bench. Anyone you speak to at the club, you talk so highly about what he's like in the dressing room and him as being a leader and an inspirational character.
Yeah.
Good to have about the place, definitely. As a Champions League level goalkeeper now, perhaps not. I think he'll be fine domestically, and maybe Celtic got to a stage where, he's going to be fine domestically, and we'll chance it in Europe. But it's also because of the Siegrist situation.
Because I think on that, Anthony, obviously mentioned Joe Hart. For me, the goal on night, I thought Kyogo was more to blame in terms of jumping out the wall and stuff. But Joe Hart is the man that's doing the wall. He's deciding who's the ball. You go here. Kyogo's at the most important bit of the wall. But like you say, the fact of Livakovic, or if there was wee snippets about Kelleher or Liverpool, for me, even if Kyogo jumps, that's getting saved. I think that's just a miss error for the goalkeeper, and for me at that level, it's criminal because Celtic were doing okay to that extent, in my opinion. I don't think final causes any real problems until the goal. I thought we had the better chances getting up to the goal, and your team talks totally different. Your mindset's different, figuring it enough on each to 1-0 down. But talking about Champions League, Anthony, there's one thing, obviously, I actually seen you speaking about it the other day. A lot of fans aren't really privy to what's going to happen next season. For my estimations, it's basically a Super League, but under the Champions League. I don't know if that's correct. You can maybe quote me on that, Anthony, but it looks to be a very enticing. Again, you can tell me more information on it. If we win the league this year, do you get right in? And if you do, I've seen quotes like 55, 60 million for just getting in, and then you've got maybe 8 to 10 games. I'm not going by from what I've seen for yourself. You can maybe tell us more on that, but it seems to be a very attractive proposition for maybe your big earners or your top players to maybe go and strut your stuff if Celtic win the league. So they could be, well, in my opinion, I think we'll win the league unless Celtic really do collapse. I can only see one winner, but again, this is me talking in September. We'll obviously talk me a different scenario, but how is the process from that, Anthony, from next year? Is it when you win the league, you're right in, and then everything else is kind of the domino effect, as you say, you win, and then you've got the 8 games or 10 games, and what position that you need to finish to get the benefits of the financial aspect?
Sorry, Anthony, just to add to what Ryan's saying there as well, am I right in saying that because of Russia and what's going on there at the moment, we have now got the automatic place from Scotland if you won the league. Is that right?
Well, it helps because Russia were in the top 10. So if you're in the top 10 leagues in Europe based on coefficient, coefficient goes by the last 5 seasons. So it doesn't include this season. So it's based on the last 5 seasons previous to this one. So
Right.
Scotland's coefficient puts them within the top 10 leagues in Europe. And Russia were in the top 10 leagues in Europe.
Yeah.
So them coming out allows Scotland an extra place. So I think Scotland were 9th or 10th in the last couple of seasons, which is why we've had automatic Champions League spots last season and this season, and also 2 Champions League spots in terms of Rangers being in the playoff last year and being in the 3rd qualifying this year. So it's the same next season because it's based on the 5 seasons previous to this. So the winner of the Scottish Premiership will go straight into the new format of the Champions League. That guarantees you around £60 million with this revamp. It's the new format of the Champions League. There's no longer group stages or anything like that. You're no longer drawn in via pots and to groups of 4. You are just in one big league of 36, and you'll be drawn. Yes, there'll be seeding, but you'll be drawn into. You could face any of these 36 teams, 35 other teams, and you could be drawn with like Bayern Munich at home, but you could also play Antwerp away and play AEK Athens at home, or you could play Man United away, that kind of thing. And you'll play 8 of these games, all one-off games.
Oh, so it all depends on.
So how does that work then, Anthony? Is that a computer draw? Is it an automatic thing?
As far as my understanding is, there will be a seeding process, but you'll still be. I don't know the ins and outs of the actual seeding process, but there will be a seeding process. But you're playing 8 teams, so but it won't be the same team. So you're not playing like if you get drawn with Man United, you're not going to be playing them home and away. You'll just be playing them. You might just be drawn with Man United away, but you could be drawn with Antwerp at home, and you could have PSG away, and you could have Lazio at home. That kind of.
So it's just 8 fixtures then, basically.
Just eight one-off games, 4 at home, 4 away, against 8 different teams, and you will. If you finish in the top 8. So it's just normal points, like your 3 points for a win, all that kind of thing, like any league. If you finish in the top 8 out of the 36, you go straight into the last 16 of the Champions League. If you finish between 25th and 36th, you're out. No drop down. You're out of Europe. The format goes into January, so you're playing Champions League football till at least January. So the league stage is right up until I think it's the end of January, and then 9th. If you finish between 9th and 24th, and this is where maybe Celtic will look to be aiming to finish in between 9th and 24th after these 8 games, because that gets you into a playoff to get into the last 16. So you will play. You will play other teams who finish between 9th and 24th. There might even be a seeding process within that as well. And that'll be a home and away leg. So that's 10 games in the Champions League. You're playing Champions League football from September to end of January. 10 games in the Champions League. That's just over a fifth of your season, if you're including the cups and cups runs. Could even be a quarter of your season. That's what Celtic see as a potential game changer. Doesn't mean it's definitely gonna happen, but it's a game changer in the fact that Celtic are going to be getting £60 million just for being in it, and then all the other riches of winning a game or all that. That's almost a leveler of other big European clubs, and almost a leveler towards bottom end Premier League clubs who get.
Do you think, Anthony, that's why maybe? Obviously you can't predict the future, but do you think that obviously with Brendan Rodgers here and the squad we've got at the moment, the board and behind the scenes and money men at Celtic who deal with all that, they're really kind of foreseen winning the league, and then maybe next summer you could see what we're wanting your maybe your £8 million signings, because they're maybe planning. Obviously, you can't predict the future, but you have got to plan for scenarios. And do you think that's what they're maybe planning on? That if you get Rodgers in, they've got enough to win the league this season and do well in Scotland, and then you might see next summer they'll be planning in January for that next summer.
Yeah, so all the briefings sort of getting in the summer when Rodgers was coming in is that he and Celtic both shared this vision of Celtic making inroads in Europe, becoming a force in Europe again. And there was talk of Champions League transfer budgets and a real focus on Europe for Celtic. Whereas before it's always been seen as a bonus. They'll never like to admit that, but that is the case. If you kept winning the league, that's all that mattered, really.
Yep.
For the Celtic hierarchy, and anything you did in Europe was a bonus. Now that's changing because I think Celtic see that they're almost falling behind from major players, well, certainly the elite in Europe, but also ones just below that level who are clubs that Celtic maybe see themselves a bit like, the likes of Ajax, the likes of Benfica, who spend big money on transfers, sell directly to the elite for 40 million, 50 million, that kind of thing, and also have a youth system and structure that sort of develops players as well. So there's a lot of focus on sort of not replicating that, but doing their own way of becoming like that. And they see this new format as a game changer. I mean, it is, if you can, like I said, if you can have £60 million, so that's all riches, you can perhaps increase wages a bit. You can spend a bit more on transfer budgets. You can hold off from selling a player on the cheap as well.
Yes.
And for players that you are trying to sign, as much as the big sell of coming to one of the biggest clubs in the world, playing in front of 60,000 fans and one of the most passionate supports, which is a huge draw, you can offer them a 50-year season, 10 games in the Champions League at least, well, 8 at least, but we're aiming for at least 10. That can be the focus. And you're going to be playing Champions League football for most of your season, from September to January.
That is absolutely frightening.
That's a major selling point.
Major selling point, because we're not stupid to suggest that players come from other countries because they want to play in the Scottish Premiership. Players choose to go to like Bournemouth or Sheffield United or whatever because they're in the Premier League. They're not going to join that club unless they have feelings towards that club. People come to Celtic now because of the stature of the club, the history of the club, and the supporter base, the fan base. It's one of the most amazing places. You speak to anyone in football, they say it's one of the most amazing places to play football. And that's due to the support, that's due to the passion, the size of the club. They don't come to play in the Scottish Premiership, no disrespect to the other teams. Yes, they might want to play in the Derby, one of the biggest derbies in the world, that kind of thing, and they want to win trophies and medals, but they don't necessarily want to play Ross County away or whatever. They are there to develop their careers and play in the Champions League for the few games, unfortunately, that Celtic usually find themselves in. But now Celtic are going to be in the Champions League right up to what was seen as the latter stage. They're going to be there till mid-January, end of January, because that's when this Champions League goes on until the big league, and they're going to be playing 8 games minimum and possibly 10, and it's just a game changer for a club like Celtic. But what needs to keep happening is that they need to put in the work now as well in Europe. The coefficient, yes, might be strong now, but they're not far away. Scotland's not far away from dropping off from being an automatic place. And so Celtic need to start winning games in the Champions League. Scotland also needs Rangers to win games in the Europa League, because it's all about winning games in the coefficient. Yeah, Aberdeen as well. It's all about just winning games for the coefficient. That's why, for example, West Ham's coefficient points are high, because we're winning games in the Conference League and Europa League. So it can be done, and the work starts now for Scotland to sort of stay in that place. But the guaranteed winners this season, the winners this season are guaranteed a spot in next year's Champions League, and the riches that come with that, which would put you, if perhaps the season after you have to have a playoff to get you into that Champions League. If Celtic have had a season of £60 million Champions League money, you'd hope that puts them in a good, strong position if they had to negotiate a couple of qualifiers.
I don't even think, JP, like Anthony says, I don't think it's even the fact for spending money next year. It puts you in a position where the next few years, I'm not going to say that the league should be guaranteed, but you'd be very disappointed but just on that season, what you could get, what comes with that, and the players might attract. You're in a very good position domestically to them. Even at the moment, we're in a position to do it. I still feel Rangers are closer than they should be towards us. I don't think they should be anywhere near us because of the riches we've had in the past, but I do feel that's due to mismanagement, obviously, at the top of the three. We spoke about it in depth. You're then in a position where the moment you're 70 million pound is the now. Then you go win the league next year. Just see win the league next year. You get 60 million pound, as Anthony says, plus the season book sales, your training sales for your strips, your training, your training gear.
Bearing in mind, Ryan, the accounts that were just announced, that's no Jota's sale or Champions League money to add to that for this season.
And then the money you're going to get financially for the 4 home games. You're probably going to say that's going to be, I was £136, £38 there for the package. But an extra game, you're maybe talking 150 per supporter, minimum. So you're maybe going to earn maybe £12 million or so just on the packages. So, like Anthony says, it's not just about next season. The riches are going to get going forward. It should solidify domestically. I'm not then saying that you need to be complacent, but it means you've got, like he says, if we don't qualify, if the coefficient is down in the next 2 or 3 years, if we don't automatically get into the Champions League, by Anthony says, you've got the animation to then buy some players to then not give it the qualifiers. But it means as well that you've got a lay-by. If you don't get to the Champions League, you don't need to then sell a player because you've got the riches sitting there to maybe cover you to then build for next season. So, like Anthony says, the domino effect that even just transfers, the domino effect about everything in football, if you get to the riches, it's a domino effect of everything else. And what Anthony says there, JP, is it shouldn't, obviously, I can't say that Celtic players will be watching this. If they do, brilliant. But I would put maybe a wee feeler to the board that, listen, obviously, I'm no silly, JP, the board will know about this, but it should whet the appetite to maybe the players. If we go and do this, this is what we're going to get. And I think that's a massive forward-thinking plan.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I think it's also a massive insight there. I think a lot of Celtic fans now hearing this probably don't actually realise what this change in terms of the Champions League is going to hold and what it actually entails. And Anthony just plainly explaining that, it's you're automatically getting 60 million just for winning the league this season. You don't even get that for winning the league in Scotland.
I think it's £2 or £3 million you get.
And probably a fish supper for the cups. But it's
I bought one for in the League Cup.
A meal deal out of Harry Ramsden's for you and your missus for winning the 2 cups. But no, it's
the growth potential, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Because
you can see
Anthony,
it.
You're just going. You look at. I don't want to lambast them and say, but I'm trying to give you a bit levels to the game here. You look at maybe Livingston, right? Now, David Martindale's, a lot of his interviews contain information about their poor finances and the way, the budget that they're running on. Celtic get to the Champions League next season. Livingston become like a Darvel FC to Celtic from there in terms of financial spending power. So, and again, I don't mean that to sound. I'm trying to put that in context of where Celtic then dwarf Scottish football. No other team in Scotland are going to earn that in the next 5 years, let alone earn it in just one summer. So it's phenomenal. It's astronomical amounts of money. And not only that, if Celtic were to do that consecutively for the next 2-3 years, in 5 year time, guys, we could be chatting about a different outlook in terms of the very club. I'm not surprised now, and it puts a lot of things into perspective for me, because not only are you able to attract a better, maybe as Anthony says, Ryan, a higher calibre, a wage bracket, a this and that. You're able to then keep what we would call our assets and keep these guys happy. That's why Celtic have been able to give Kyogo a pay rise in a new contract, Maeda a pay rise in a new contract, Abada a pay rise in a new contract.
McGregor.
Stephen Welsh is on a new contract as well. Callum McGregor signed a new contract as well. I can understand now why these players were quickly, I'll sign a new deal, no problem, because they've probably been sold the vision by the club and by the manager. So it then puts that into perspective as well. That is unbelievable. See, just hearing that, I'm actually quite calm now, and I'll definitely from this conversation, I will definitely put my bottle of bleach away in a locked cabinet, because I was very closely, especially the other night, very closely to whipping open that bottle.
I think after the transfer one day, mate, I think me and your bleach was, I don't think it was Aldi bleach, it was the Mess's bleach, it was getting stronger.
It was, mate, the fumes in it. By the way, the sheet to open every window and the doors and everything. Honestly, the fumes were taking over.
But I obviously, it's been amazing to chat to you. The last time you bit like that, so obviously Celtic this season so far in Champions League. Which been your thoughts been, your consensus been so far?
Oh, I don't know. It's been strange. I think it's been strange watching Celtic this season.
Have you had the bleach out as well?
Not quite there yet. But I mean, it's that's very strong.
He keeps us appealing to Devon for trips away because he doesn't want to watch us. That's what the problem is.
I don't know. Do you know what? It was after the transfer, because you're so consumed in reporting on it, and quite often you do desensitize yourself to it being your club when you're just reporting on the news of it. With Rodgers coming in, it only dawned on me that Brendan Rodgers was Celtic's manager, even though I've been reporting on all of it. When I was in Oslo after the window, because I always take a break after the window, like 10 days or 12 days, whatever, because you just need a break because it just fries your brain after it. And I was in Oslo visiting my brother, but went to the Celtic Supporters Club there to watch the derby. And that's the first time it really dawned on me seeing Brendan Rodgers in his suit. And I was like, oh, shit. Oh, sorry. I'm not sure if I'm
no, sorry.
Oh, no, you're all right, mate.
Rodgers is Celtic. It just dawned on me, Rodgers is back as Celtic manager, and it just felt strange. And it just, it was just that moment of acceptance. It's just like, yeah, he's actually Celtic manager again. It feels weird seeing him there, even though I've watched all the other games. And so it's been sort of underwhelming, I think. I think when he came in, there was a lot of excitement. Like I was saying, there was a lot of briefing about Champions League transfer budgets, all that kind of thing. And the focus is going to be on Europe. But I guess that is the long-term focus. If they can make... Rodgers has stated this summer, that this season's aim is to be in Europe after Christmas, whether that is qualifying for the last 16 or perhaps more likely finishing third and going into the Europa League. So that is the aim for Europe this season. He said it himself, so that's what he can be judged on. Domestically, I don't know, because I wasn't expecting Celtic. I mean, in May this year, I was not expecting Celtic to be in a period of transition. I was not expecting them to need to tweak the team too much, tweak the squad too much, and that's exactly what's happened. It's almost been a bit of a rebuild, and a bit of a forced rebuild as well. And that's where it feels a bit strange for me. I don't know where they're at. I don't know what they're trying to do. I don't know what the game plan is in a lot of these matches. Yeah, I still feel like they're trying to find their feet themselves from moving from Ange to Rodgers. Even that game against Feyenoord, I remember listening to Sports Sound podcast on my way into work yesterday, and it was almost as if Celtic had won the game, and I was like, was I watching the same game? Yes, I was in the pub and I'd had a few drinks, but I was pretty sure I didn't see that as a great Celtic performance. Yes, they were in the game, but I thought it was. I thought the quality of the game was poor in general.
Yeah.
And there was little pockets of play where Celtic were very good, and it was when it was that start of the middle third for Feyenoord, and we'd nip the ball. Matt O'Reilly would just make a tackle and nip the ball away from them, and we'd have a little 2 or 3 passes and create a chance. That kind of play was good, and Alistair Johnston was really good. Scales was really good, but other than that, I thought Hatate was really poor. I thought we still looked disjointed. I know there's a lot of players out. I think for the Champions League games, certainly, Celtic need to have their best players playing. And I always feel we're so unlucky with that. Kyogo missed a lot of the Champions League last season. Before that, in previous Rodgers spells, I remember Celtic had Near Baton centre-back for quite a few games. Celtic need to have their best players playing to compete in the Champions League. Yes, Feyenoord were perhaps there for the taking and 9 men didn't help. But in general, if Celtic are going to want to do well in the group, they've got to have their best players playing and fit. And that's just not going to be the case this season, as well, because we know Carter Vickers is out, Nawrocki's out, Abada's out. So I always feel we're quite unfortunate. We always have a big injury or a bit of an injury crisis ahead of the European games. And last season, we had Giakoumakis starting up front in a few of the games before Giakoumakis was really hit his form, if you know what I mean. So, it's just the way it works out. But that again is going to perhaps be different in the future if you can build a squad of in-depth quality. We've got in-depth quality, in-depth in various positions of the field. But yeah, it's been a bit of an underwhelming start, but then the derby helped. The derby win helped. It wasn't a vintage performance, but the game management was brilliant. The players that needed to turn up, McGregor, who'd been a bit off the boil, who's well entitled to be off the boil, given his service for the club the last few seasons. But he turned up, and Celtic just bossed that. And not bossed the game as in they were totally dominant, but the game management was spot on. And that kind of helps things. It means, I think, I don't know, it just seems like when I watch them play, I just can't really see what they're trying to do. And I'm no football expert. I just do the news, so I'm just giving my opinion as a punter. Really, I can't really work out what their game plan is, what they're trying to do. It seems quite disjointed, and I think what's got them over the line so far, apart from the game at Ibrox, which was game management, got them over the line, was just moments of individual brilliance and having better players in domestically. That's what shone through. That's what got them through against Dundee, 0-0 at half time, and then eventually better players shine through. More often than not, that's going to be the case. But hopefully that changes. Hopefully you can start to see the transition of what Rodgers is trying to do, what kind of game plan he's trying to play, and see that being developed through the squad. There's different styles of management as well that they're maybe getting used to. Certain players will flourish under it, like Matt O'Reilly. I've talked about this previously, that I think he's a player that Rodgers is really going to love working with. Hatate as well. So Rodgers loves intelligent players who are eager to learn. And I'll always use Stuart Armstrong as an example of that. Armstrong's development under Rodgers was incredible, and Armstrong is a very intelligent guy and very switched on. And I think Rodgers likes to micromanage. He likes to constantly be talking to his players, have them into his office every few weeks and talk about their development and go over that. That's completely different to Ange's style. Ange would usually just speak to them a couple of times at team meetings, at training sessions, and then for his team talks at games. So it's very different. He'd have other people doing the micromanagement and the development. So it's not like one is better than the other, but certain players adapt to certain styles better. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out with certain players and how the whole team sort of grows and develops. And like Roger said after the window, is that it's a process this season. There's the recruitment process is very much going to be January is very much part of this season's recruitment process. I think that tells you they weren't able to get certain targets that they wanted to get for key positions, and they weren't able to do what they wanted to do in all the positions that they wanted to get players for.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Anthony, in your assessment of the team on it as a whole at the moment. I did identify pretty early on in the summer that we were going to run for a bit of a transition, and I did get some interesting comments in our normal comment section from people, saying, why am I saying that? But it should be a seamless transition with the manager, and I highlighted very early on, it's two very different styles of management there, and styles of playing. I think you're pretty spot on. I think another thing you've not alluded to there is the fact that the amount of new players that are trying to get in bed in at the moment as well. And they're trying to get to grips with what playing for Celtic is all about. You get guys from different cultures, boys at home, coming from Norway, Scandinavian market. You've got them boys like Yang coming from South Korea. Probably never played in Europe before, unless it was in friendlies, etc., with his Korean club. So I do think you're spot on, mate, in terms of your assessment there. I think Celtic are in a transitional period at the moment. We never really seen Angie's Celtic team until around about the October-November period of the season. Although there was games we got results in, and one or two games we weren't too far away in. The clear identity of what Chan's tried to set early on. I think Rodgers is trying to do the same. I think Brendan's trying to set. He's also set standards. So if you look at, obviously there's a backstory there of Bernabei missing a team meeting. I think Rodgers is labelled right away. Right, if you're gonna show us that your punctuation and everything's not going to be there and your timekeeping's going to be poor, then you'll not play. Something like that. So I'll take away the one thing you want to do the most, which is play. You need to learn a lesson, and you need to learn it quickly. I do think that's probably potentially a reason why Bernabei's out the Champions League squad as well. I think there's maybe an ongoing issue there. A manager like Brendan Rodgers won't tolerate nonsense like that happening round about the club. The club don't need outside noise going on when they're trying to bed in a transitional period. So for me, I think he's spot on. I think Brendan showed already that he's how good a manager he is, especially the game at Ibrox. I thought his subs were superb, Anthony, in terms of the tactical approach he made with them and when he made the subs and how they impacted that game. I think yourself, Anthony, pretty soon, mate, if we start winning in the Champions League, especially with the current team that's playing in the Champions League, there'll be a bit more content going up for this page alone. The wee man will be doing cartwheels around George Square, having Liam Scales playing at centre back, and we start winning in the Champions League. Because, again, probably one of the first guys that you would say, never in a month of Sundays, is he going to get a game in the Celtic team? And it's just through this injury crisis that he's got his chance. And in my opinion, guys, he has grabbed it with both hands, and he's now actually becoming one of the major standouts in the team when he's performing. Because for me, he's the most solid defender we've got in the team at the moment. So he's the better option of anyone else that's coming in beside him, because he's the one that's coming in and it's a steady approach. You know what you're getting. He becomes very aggressive. He's now became very aggressive in his defending. He's putting his head in a lot more. Like the other night, the other night's game, he tackled the two boys. He had a wee smile on his face doing it as well. I quite like that. I quite like that side to players. Anthony, there's quite a long time on here we've spoke about our team are too nice in terms of the way they are. That they're not big in stature in terms of their height. A lot of small technical players, and there is games that we feel that we get bullied on the pitch. When that normally happens, Celtic tend to struggle, especially if they're playing up against a low block. When teams come physical with us, but all in all, with your assessment there, I think it's pretty spot on, mate. I do think we will start to see the new signings, especially, coming to fruition. We've not even seen Marco Tilio yet. so we don't know how good he is. We've heard Scott McDonald speak about him, saying he's every bit as good, if not better, than Patrick Roberts. If he's even 70% of Patrick Roberts, then we're in for a treat, because I thought Patrick Roberts was absolute quality. So all in all, mate, I think you're spot on. It has been quite underwhelming. I think a lot of Celtic fans feel it's been underwhelming in the transfer market as well, in terms of the level of player that we brought in. I think it's criminal, personally, that we sold Jota for the amount we sold him for, and we only spent about £1.5 million on a guy to bring in to potentially be part of a replacement for Jota. I do understand. I would imagine Lewis Palmer is probably Jota's main replacement, but there was other guys recruited in that position as well, bought for less money than what we paid for Lewis Palmer. So I do think it has been underwhelming in that factor. And then obviously the other night comes and the game just sort of bypassed us, and that we never really done much in the game, and we never really created much. I don't really remember the Feyenoord goalie having to do much. Maybe the toe poke from Maeda. But then out with that, I think there was a lot of bad decisions made and a bit of naivety shown in our play, especially the two boys with the sending offs. So, I mean, Celtic fans are saying that, you know, Lagerbielke's never a sending off. My view of that, and I spoke to Ryan right after the game, and this was before Rodgers was interviewed, and I says, I don't think he had to be involved with that passage of play. I don't know what he's doing. I think there's an element of panic that's maybe come in, and that's why you've seen his arm getting flung across the boy. But as I say, I think as we go, you're spot on in that as well, Anthony. The game at Ibrox was massive for us, because it's helped to kind of set up the season domestically, I think, for us.
Yep.
I think there's no point in doing that now, and then we go to Livingston and we have an absolute mare of a day at Livingston on Saturday. I think we need to keep that momentum going, and we need to try our best to keep that flow going, because as you've said, mate, there's a massive incentive at the end of the domestic league. Now we're out the League Cup, so we don't have that distraction now, but there's also plenty more for us to play for. So I think, Anthony, you are spot on. And obviously, again, before we go, mate, me personally, I want to thank you for coming on and taking the time to give us that wonderful insight you've gave us in terms of how transfers actually work, what it's like in the Sky Sports Arena, and then obviously the wee insight you've gave us to the new Champions League outlook and how that's going to be, because I think a lot of people seeing this and hearing it, it's probably opened a lot of people's eyes, especially mine, looking at how lucrative it's going to be for the club, and it kind of puts a few things into perspective. But if you don't mind, Anthony, before we go, I'm going to ask you if it's okay I can contact you personally, because there's a couple of more things I do want to ask you. I know we'd love to sit here and chat with you all day, but unfortunately we can't. But so if it's okay with yourself, mate, there's a couple of things I do still want to know, and if it's okay, I want to ask you when we're done.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure chatting to you both.
No problem.
Person as well, it's getting to know the ins and outs of certain things. Again, I would like to say we're quite privileged speaking to you, mate, because it's no information you get all the time. I'd like to say we are privileged about the platform we're doing, and we're getting to speak to guys like yourself. It's good insights for us, and obviously the viewers as well, Anthony. So again, I really appreciate your time, mate. I hope you have a good day. I know it's a busy day for you ahead, so we really do appreciate you taking your time out your busy schedule, Anthony, and good luck for the rest of the day, mate, and obviously the rest of the season for Celtic. Hopefully we're not having a lot of bleach involved in the future, but hopefully going forward we're celebrating. And again, Anthony, I'm probably saying it'd be good to chat to you and again and get some more information if we can. But again, I appreciate your time, Anthony, and thank you and take care.
The only bleach will be involved with, man, is if you start dyeing your hair again.
You're not going to talk and get a transplant.
You'll end up looking like Adrian Mutu when remember the Romanians all dyed their hair. But no, Anthony, superb, mate, honestly. And thanks again, buddy.
No, thanks for having me on. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate.